Okay, welcome to Facebook Live here from my office in Washington, and we have here today one of my good friends here in Washington, from Representative Lee Zeldin from New York's 1st Congressional District, and I wanted to bring Lee on today for a Facebook Live just to talk about what's going on with this impeachment sham. Lee is on one of the committees that is a committee of jurisdiction that was able to be in the room behind closed doors when Adam Schiff had his closed door hearings. Also, I believe you were part of the open door hearings. Were y'all?
I was at all the open hearings, helping the Intelligence Committee, but still as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And same thing now with yesterday's hearing that took place at the House Judiciary Committee. I'm just continuing to work with the committees through the process.
Yeah. So Lee was sharing with me some of the things that he saw go on during the Schiff hearing behind closed doors, and I think it was oversight and governmental reform, it was intel, and it was foreign affairs that had jurisdiction under the impeachment inquiry rules that Nancy Pelosi passed. They were the committees of jurisdiction, as we call it here, and he saw some things go on there. He's an attorney, former prosecutor, U.S. Attorney's Office too.
I was actually on active duty in the Army when I was a prosecutor, prosecuting cases large and small.
Large and small.
Contested and uncontested.
So he brings a unique prosecutor perspective to it, and so I wasn't able to be in the room, just like you on Facebook and across America. I was kept just as much in the dark as all Americans were, except for that small group that Nancy Pelosi allowed to be in the room. So I'm just going to turn it over to Lee and let him tell you just some of the things that are going on up here with the impeachment sham, whatever you want to share with the folks. This is Facebook Live, so it's really all of my Facebook friends, but people from all over the nation that may be tuning in.
Well, thank you all for tuning in. I'm honored to be here in Jeff Duncan's office. He's been serving his constituents exceptionally. It's great to be able to call him a friend, to work with him as we witness this impeachment sham go from one phase to the next. And right now we're in the Jerry Nadler phase that is going to be as short as possible, I'm sure, for Dems rushing.
So this is what Adam Schiff delivered from the Intel Committee to Jerry Nadler, saying this is the case against President Trump and why we should impeach. But there's not a single material fact in all of this.
Well, what's interesting that you don't see there in that report is the underlying evidence still has not been provided to the House Judiciary Committee. So now what should have happened yesterday is that Adam Schiff himself should have brought his Schiff report to the House Judiciary Committee. And get this, a little bit of history. The Clinton impeachment, Ken Starr, the Starr report, he brought it in person, under oath, answering questions from Republicans, Democrats, and President Clinton's counsel. Now, I think that in fairness here, the first hearing that the House Judiciary should have had is for Adam Schiff to bring the Schiff report to the House Judiciary Committee with the underlying evidence, which still hasn't been provided.
It's not in here.
And to answer questions from Republicans, Democrats, and President Trump's counsel. Now, the first hearing that took place yesterday, they brought in academics, and these academics, many of them were, by the way, none of them voted for President Trump. Many of them decided before they came in some of the most biased, unhinged, hyperbolic ways possible, crazy emotions possible. Their mind was made up, and one of them was even taking shots at the president's young teenage son. It was insane. And they were commenting on facts as if the House Judiciary Committee had already been provided with facts, and as if these people knew what all the underlying evidence was. This report came out just before that hearing took place, so you don't have a panel where all the Republicans and Democrats had read and digested it.
So this came out yesterday morning.
Well, it came out just before that. It was right. The end of the day.
End of that would have been
it was the day Tuesday, before. Yeah. The House Intel Committee had a vote in the evening, the night before. So this timeline is so rushed. And so that's what should have happened first. Adam Schiff should have came brought his report. Now what's next? On Monday, they're saying that they're going to have a fact-based hearing. The rumor is that Schiff is going to send one of his staffers there in his place to answer the questions. I don't know what Adam Schiff is planning on doing on Monday that's more important. I don't know what his conflict is. But it's not the Daniel Goldman report. It's the Adam Schiff report. And he should be coming to answer it. So now you asked about the closed-door depositions. I would say when you saw on national TV Adam Schiff was saying this was analogous to a grand jury proceeding, I'll tell you, this is the worst grand jury proceeding ever in the history of America, if that's what it's supposed to be analogous to. Schiff was the prosecutor, the judge, the jury, the witness coach. He was the chief strategist for lying and leaking. And guess how Adam Schiff ruled on any objection that was raised by anyone at any point? In Adam Schiff's favor every time. He loved cherry picking out leaks, withholding key evidence, and outright lying to the American public. So the public was being misled. And then you get to the open hearing, you go through that entire sham of a process, and now based on presumptions, guesses, hearsay, and about 3% of the story when it comes to some stuff that you might want to call a fact, trying to connect dots that aren't actually connected. They want to impeach the President of the United States. But we have a great thing on our side, the other 97% of the story. And that's why this has been so downhill for the Democrats since the one of the open hearing, is because the American public is smarter than Adam Schiff gives them credit for. And smarter than Nancy Pelosi gives them credit for. And they're seeing the entire story. They're making their own minds up for themselves. They realize that it's screwed up on the process, it's screwed up on the substance, that they're trying to rip our country in half, and that instead we should be passing legislation that moves our country forward.
Legislation like funding the government, a National Defense Authorization Act, USMCA trade deal with Mexico and Canada that replaces NAFTA. There's some important things that are hanging out there that Nancy Pelosi didn't get in there. Let's turn to the facts. Jim Jordan has been a rock star on this as well. Elise Stefanik, Matt Gaetz. I go through a whole litany of Republican members that have just been great, like Lee Zeldin has, from what we've been able to see. And Lee's done a great job with letting our conference know as this process has gone on as well, sort of what was going on behind closed doors. But the facts haven't changed. Jim's been clear about that. We have the transcript of the call. Both Zelensky, President Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. Zelensky and President Trump both say there was no bribery, no quid pro quo. Those are two of the facts. The other two facts are there were numerous meetings, I think 5 meetings with high-level government officials from the vice president on down, with Ukrainian officials, U.S. officials. No quid pro quo, no bribery, no you did this and we'll release the money. In fact, the funding wasn't even discussed. After the 25th, the July 25th call, there were 5 meetings, I believe. And the fourth material fact is what?
Yeah, so and here's a great thing. I mean, we're summing it up for some of the basic, really important, most important facts. But you actually have, if you wanted to, if someone asked, well, what's the top 50 facts? Like, we have the answers. The Democrats don't. And they're trying to connect dots that aren't connected. So as Jeff Duncan just pointed out, on that July 25th call, there's no reference at all to a hold on aid. President Zelensky doesn't know that there's a hold on aid. There's no quid pro quo. In President Zelensky's words, there's no demand, there's no pressure. But get this, it's not until after they read it in Politico on August 29th, over a month later, that President Zelensky and his team gets confirmation that there's a hold on aid.
And the money had already been released at that time.
Well, almost. So this is a critical point. Think about it, visualize this timeline. It's not until August 29th. The hold gets lifted shortly after that. And do you know what Ukraine had to do in order to get that hold released?
Absolutely nothing.
And that's a basic version of the facts. These are just black and white truths. And if you want to get further into it, so what about Adam Schiff told us that such and such happened on September 7th. What was that about? Are you referring to that part in Ambassador Taylor's opening statement, page 12, where Ambassador Taylor tells us that Tim Morrison told him, that Sondland told Morrison, that the president told Sondland, that really your case is going to be built on second, third, fourth, and no hand hearsay? So we have the basic facts, but even as you get further into it, and they want to ask the question, well, what's the fact about what happened on September 7th? Wasn't there some type of a conversation that Ambassador Taylor told us about? It's not a conversation that Ambassador Taylor had with the President of the United States. He never spoke to the President of the United States about any of this. And every time Ambassador Taylor and Kurt Volker, the former special envoy to Ukraine, had conversations with President Zelensky and Yarmak and all these top people at the top of the Zelensky administration, there's never any reference to quid pro quo or a hold on aid. By the way, President Trump, in fact, ends up meeting with President Zelensky in the United States in September. He would have met with him on September 1st if not for Hurricane Dorian that hit. But let's get into one other thing I think is really important. At the heart of that July 25th call that the Democrats are making an issue of is that the President asked with regards to two different investigations. Ukrainians interfered in the 2016 election it's a different scale than the whole Russia investigation. That goes right to the top. All of our intelligence agencies talking about that going straight up to the very highest levels of the Russian government and being big. But you have Ambassador Chally, the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., writing an op-ed against Donald Trump during the 2016 election. You have Alexandra Chalupa, DNC lobbyist, working with consultants, working with the Ukrainian embassy to dig up dirt on President Trump during the campaign. There's the whole Black Ledger scandal to bring down an official from the Trump campaign with Ukrainians. You have some of the origins of the Steele dossier. You have Avakov and some of his comments that he made towards Trump. So these lists, all these examples of Ukrainians interfering in the 2016 election, I thought that was in our national interest to have a problem with foreigners interfering in the United States election. And all of these Americans, including the Attorney General Barr, there's an investigation at that level. Having concern for that, I think, is important. And by the way, this whole spin from the Democrats as if that is to impact the 2020 election, give me a break. So that's the first one. The second one is this issue with Hunter Biden. Burisma and Zolchevsky, you have this a corrupt Ukrainian gas company run by...
Burisma is the Ukrainian gas company.
Corrupt company run by a corrupt oligarch, Zolchevsky, hiring Hunter Biden, who has no energy experience, no Ukraine experience, just because he's the son of the sitting vice president, who's the point man at the time for the Obama
That didn't pass the smell test for anyone.
Yeah, even George Kent testified that it seemed like there was a conflict of interest there. He was getting paid a whole lot of money for that arrangement. He was getting
Almost
paid
$1 million a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we have heard everything from as little as $50,000 a month to more. And I'll tell you what, even if it was just $50,000 a month from a corrupt foreign company run by a corrupt foreign oligarch with corruption investigations and a history of corruption investigations in the past, it doesn't pass the smell test. I would say that Burisma, Zolchevsky, Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden, they should not be immune from scrutiny just because Joe Biden's running for president. I would say if it's not illegal, then it should be. And there was an actual corruption investigation that was going on in Ukraine that President Trump was asking about, that others have been asking about, and I think the president is right to be concerned about corruption. And by the way, it is. You know this. Jeff Duncan knows this, and it was in the NDA just last year. It was passed in 2014, the Ukrainian Assistance Act. The president can't even give your tax dollars to Ukraine unless the executive branch is confirming that there's enough progress being made in Ukraine to fight corruption. There's a long history of corruption in Ukraine. 145
Democrats voted for the NDA that had that language in it, including Chairman Schiff. Let's go back to the corruption investigation of Burisma and the company that Hunter Biden worked for. There was a corruption investigation going on that apparently Vice President Biden didn't like. Didn't like the fact that the prosecutor, the Ukrainian prosecutor, was investigating Burisma because his son sat on the board. So the way I understand it, listening to Joe Biden's own words, he withheld some foreign aid from Ukraine until they fired that prosecutor. So in order to get that foreign aid, the Ukrainian parliament was brought back into session, and within 6 hours, that prosecutor was fired.
In Joe Biden's own words, he threatened the loss of $1 billion if Ukraine didn't fire Viktor Shokin, who happened to have an open investigation into Burisma. This is Hunter Biden's company. Now, the pro-Biden version of what happened is that they say that this has nothing at all to do with the fact that the prosecutor was looking into his son's company, and that it was that Victor Shokin was corrupt, and that was the consensus of the Western world. So that's the version of the story that people use to make the claim that it's therefore debunked anything at all that you're going to say about any of this. Really? So let's just say you had Joe Biden in front of you and you're able to ask him some questions, or you had Hunter Biden in front of you and you're able to ask him some questions. By the way, if there's a Senate trial that goes on, maybe they'll have the opportunity to ask Hunter Biden some of these questions. But if you asked, what conversations did you have with your father, with your father's office? Did anyone who you worked with have with your father's office with regards to Burisma or Ukraine or Victor Shokin? What conversations took place? Hunter Biden is a fact witness. I don't know all of the different answers that Hunter Biden's would provide to all of our questions, but the idea that by saying that it was the position that Victor Shokin was corrupt, and therefore Joe Biden was right to threaten the loss of Victor Shokin, and that therefore, even if you adopted that as 100% true, to take that and then make the claim that therefore anything at all that's going to come out of your mouth that has anything to do with Burisma, Zlochevsky, Victor Shokin, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden is therefore debunked. That leap of people trying to protect the Bidens, I mean, talking about dirty money, that Ukrainian family scheme of the Bidens to make a ton of money with that particular arrangement, at the very least, doesn't pass a smell test, but I would say that should never happen again.
Yeah, and I was going on just Joe Biden's words himself when he bragged at a conference about being able to get the prosecutor fired by holding the money. I'm not taking his words out of context. I look at his words exactly as he speaks them. Whereas the Democrats in this impeachment sham are trying to twist President Trump's words on the phone call, and they're using conjecture, hearsay, third-party overhearance to impeach a president as their so-called facts. And it's just amazing where we are, America, on this impeachment process under this. There's been no other impeachment process in the history of the country that I'm aware of that didn't have bipartisan support. This has been straight down the party lines. Not a single Republican has supported this so far.
Yeah, and their star witnesses. Earlier we were talking a lot about the hearsay component. I gave Bill Taylor as an example. Bill Taylor wasn't on that July 25th call. They had a star witness named Fiona Hill. Fiona Hill was on the call. She was actually snorkeling during that call on July 25th. You have all of these different people coming as star witnesses, and even Bill Taylor's admission is, I can only tell you what other people told me. And then when they get asked the questions of, are you aware of any crime, any impeachable offense, any bribery, any quid pro quo, whenever any of them were asked any of these questions, they're all either stone cold silence or they're saying no, because they had nothing. And then they brought Ambassador Sondland in, who is the U.S. ambassador to the EU. And at the beginning of his statement, he was talking about how he thought that there was a quid pro quo linking U.S. aid to investigations. And then when he gets asked about it, see, this is the thing, if you tune into well, first off, if it's a leaked opening statement of the closed door depositions followed by 10 hours of questions and answers, you bet that there's some other information there that Adam Schiff wasn't providing you. To the open hearings, Gordon Sondland may have been making statements like that in his opening statement, but when he was cross-examined in a way on that claim, you know what he called it? A guess. He's telling the American public that the claim was a guess. And then when he was asked more questions by Michael Turner, he not only said that he didn't hear that from President Trump, or Rudy Giuliani, or anyone. He didn't hear it from anyone on the planet. So, to take...
Just his opinion. He was making a guess.
He was, in his words, he called it a guess. And that was... So Adam Schiff, when he announced his report a couple days ago, he had a banner up there with him with 4 quotes. 2 of the quotes were Sondland's quotes. What Schiff doesn't provide, because this is how Schiff rolls, this is his style. He wants to write the world's greatest parody ever. He wants to take down a sitting president to appease an enraged activist liberal base that put a gavel in his hand. And what he doesn't tell you is that those two quotes from Ambassador Sondland are guesses. And it's not based on any firsthand information confirming it. As a matter of fact, what did Donald Trump tell Ambassador Sondland when the quid pro quo was brought up?
So want no.
He doesn't want a quid pro quo.
Right.
He's not asking for anything from Ukraine. So, the other thing too, that they waited until the day before Thanksgiving. The Democrats finally released the Mark Sandy transcript. No coincidence. People are getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving with their families. And in it, Mark Sandy, the person who testified as this dedicated career civil servant at the Office of Management and Budget, who came in to answer the question, why was there hold on aid to Ukraine? Mark Sandy's answer was because of the answer that he was given was because of the president's concern about other countries paying their fair share. And because it's inconvenient, any truth, any fact that's inconvenient, the Dems want you to make believe either doesn't matter or doesn't exist. Yesterday, the Harvard law professor, when he was asked, does it matter that the aid was eventually released? The Harvard law professor said, no, it doesn't matter. So that was one question and answer, but you basically scratch your head. So does the other 97% of the story not matter? Does it not matter that Ukraine didn't know, that President Zelensky didn't know until August 29th, that the aid gets released shortly thereafter and he have to do anything? Does none of that matter? Does anything that we discussed today, any fact at all that's inconvenient for Adam Schiff, should we all adopt the position of Jerry Nadler and his committee and the triggered, unhinged Harvard law professor who hates the president, has been calling for his impeachment forever? Should we just play along with their version of it, that every single fact that we just said just doesn't matter?
Yeah, facts do matter, folks, and you know it. This impeachment sham goes back to within hours, if not minutes, of the president's inauguration. Probably goes earlier than that, but I'll reference the Washington Post article. Let the impeachment begin. Within hours of the president and being sworn in as the 45th president of the United States, the Washington Post was saying, let's go ahead and begin the impeachment process. Then you hear tweets from the lawyer of the whistleblower, the believed whistleblower. You hear some of the law professors' tweets that were there yesterday were all talking about impeaching the president. It's because of the hatred of Donald Trump and the disagreement with his policies. Veneman, they just did not agree with how the president was handling his policy, foreign policy with Ukraine. And it's indicative of the deep state. They're like, how dare this novice real estate tycoon come in here and try to tell us, career politicians or career foreign service people, career foreign affairs diplomats, tell us how we're supposed to handle foreign policy. How dare him do that? And then they've been working against him ever since over disagreement with policy.
Right. The chief.
So we're going to impeach the president over disagreement with policy and our personal dislike with him, the Democrats' personal dislike of it. Yeah. Folks, we're in a very predicament and precarious situation in this country now because politics is playing such a big part into a constitutional duty and responsibility we have, and that's impeachment of a president if they had broken high crimes and misdemeanors, crimes that are worthy of impeachment. We haven't seen that. You just heard Lee Zeldin talk about that. Lee Zeldin from the 1st District of New York. What do you think is going to happen? Nancy Pelosi is talking about moving forward with the impeachment, articles of impeachment, and a vote. This is how I understand that it plays out. Correct me if I'm wrong. And these are Special Olympic socks, by the way. If you see that on camera, I support the Special Olympics. And Rachel Lewis in Greenville gave me those. I wear them. Hey, Rachel. You'll see your picture around the office too, by the way. So if they bring the articles of impeachment for a floor vote and it does pass the House of Representatives, it has to be presented to the United States Senate within 24 hours, and they have to stop all legislative activity and immediately take up the trial within that short period of time. And they can't do anything else until they finish that. So we have to fund the government. We have to pass the NDAA, which authorizes the defense of this country. So important. The USMCA is an important trade deal that we need to get done. I'm sure there's a couple other pieces of legislation that we have to do. So if they do articles of impeachment before we fund the government, then basically the Senate can't take up a government funding bill even if we pass it, because they can't take up any other legislation that will in effect have a government shutdown. That's how I understand the process and it playing out.
Yeah, and there's a lot to do in a short amount of time, and there are a lot of really good things to do in a short amount of time, but unfortunately, everything has just been total gridlock over this impeachment sham. They're racing to get articles of impeachment to the House floor before Christmas. A message to many of our colleagues who are in those districts that President Trump won in 2016. There's 31 House Democrats in seats that President Trump won. For many of those who will choose to vote for those articles of impeachment, it's been nice serving with you. You won't be here after next election for all of the right reasons and then some. But as far as how the process goes after the House votes, the Senate is going to just have to focus entirely on what could be a many-week trial. Hopefully it's a process that allows the president to be able to call witnesses, to have his counsel present, to be able to cross-examine people who haven't been really examined enough. There are some people who will have another opportunity to answer questions, but instead of it being this shift process where, for example, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman is sitting in the closed-door deposition next to his attorney Volkov and Adam Schiff. The three of them are right next to each other. You ask them, you had 2 conversations with people outside of the NSC about the July 25th call. Who did you talk to? Well, I spoke to George Kent from the State Department. No problem, I'll offer that up right away. Well, who's the other person you talked to? I can't tell you that, because if I tell you that name, then I'll be outing the whistleblower. By the way, I don't know who the whistleblower is. Adam Schiff is saying, don't answer that question, don't answer that question. If you answer that question, you'll be outing the whistleblower. You're asking him this question because you want to out the whistleblower.
But in the same breath, he says, I don't know.
But Schiff is saying he doesn't know who the whistleblower is. I'm scratching my head as I'm witnessing this during a closed-door deposition. Well, it ends up playing out again when we get to the open hearing, where you have that question posed, and Schiff says he doesn't know who the whistleblower is. Colonel Vindman saying he can't name who that person is because then he'll be out of the whistleblower. But by the way, as I mentioned in the closed-door deposition, I have no idea who the whistleblower is. I can't mention that name or I'll be outing him. So, give me a break. Listen, that's just one question. There are so many other questions. It's not about outing the whistleblower, by the way. I want to know about, the whistleblower claims to have spoken to people with first-hand information. Have we spoken to all these people? I don't know. Is there someone else who has something to tell us? By the way, what if the whistleblower spoke to someone who has first-hand information and Adam Schiff hasn't called that person yet? Makes you scratch your head. Why didn't he call that person yet? So anyway,
do you think Adam Schiff could be called as a witness by the Senate?
He absolutely should be. He is a fact witness. And with the origins of the whistleblower complaint, Adam Schiff's team was in touch with the whistleblower before the whistleblower was a whistleblower. Before he had even hired an attorney.
Coaching him on what to say, how to write his report.
And told him not only to hire an attorney, but to go file a complaint, to go to the ICIG. And then the whistleblower fills out his complaint, and you know what box he forgot to check? That very clear as day box, there's no doubt what that instruction was. It was whether or not you've been in touch with members of Congress and their staff.
He did not check that box.
And he did not check that box. So the President's counsel was not invited to go to any of those open hearings, to cross-examine any of the fact witnesses.
The closed door or the open door, right?
The closed door or the open door. But get this, after all of that, he gets an invite to have his counsel come ask questions to some Harvard law professor and some Stanford law professor who are, hair is on fire, triggered anti-Trump, deciding that the president needs to be impeached already.
One of these professors can't even walk on the same sidewalk as the Trump hotel.
Insulting the president's young teenage son. And the president's counsel is supposed to show up there and ask the Harvard and Stanford law professor the questions that the counsel should have been able to ask any of the fact witnesses or before Schiff's committee. So I'm hoping that the process is fair to the president, and really when you make the process fair to the president with some of the issues that need to get worked out, you're making it fair to the American public. You're making it fair to future presidents. Because, gosh, if she was on the other foot, imagine if we were doing this to Barack Obama.
Right.
We wouldn't do what's happening. And Doug Collins said yesterday, talking about railroading it. We wouldn't do it because we care about our country.
And we also
Care
believe in
about
the
fairness.
rule of law, we believe in facts, we believe in honesty. It's amazing what we're watching with Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Nadler, who I think are the worst culprits in this. There's a lot of other members of the Intel Committee that have just been, very vile that I've seen. But America is going to see it play out before their eyes. Now we're in open door hearings. They've seen you guys, the Republicans on there, actually just eradicate the witnesses and any testimony they've given. You have gotten the truth out. You've been rock stars on that.
I just want facts. That's the greatest thing about the Republicans' approach to this entire issue. I mean, I walk out of a closed door deposition, and I don't care if it was the best day for Republicans or the best day for the president or it's the best day for Democrats, no matter who the witness was. My position, the Republicans were saying, we need to release the transcript in its entirety, unredacted, to the American public as quickly as possible. We believe that the American public is smart enough to form their own conclusions for themselves, and instead of having media spin based off of some Democrat spin, off of some cherry-picked information while withholding other key facts, just give
Select releases of information, cherry-picked, to create a narrative the Democrats wanted is what Adam Schiff's been doing. Instead of releasing the whole transcript and letting us, the American people, read it for ourselves and come to our own conclusion.
That's it. And we are not asking for, we have not asked for anything more than what you've
Because
seen
the facts,
in the Clinton impeachment, the Nixon
the
impeachment.
facts speak for themselves, don't they, Lee? I mean, if American people saw everything that you heard, everything that was laid out there, the facts speak for themselves.
But Rachel Maddow told me that I can only listen to 3% of the facts. I have to ignore, or Don Lemon on CNN told me that I have to ignore the other 97% of the story because they might help the president's case. That's not how this works.
No.
It's about presenting the evidence that not only we see the same thing play out with the FISA court, and as we have the IG, the Inspector General's report is about to come out. When you go to that FISA court, it's about the government not only presenting the best evidence in support of your case, it's also about presenting the best evidence against your case. Because especially in a FISA court, the person who you want to get that spying warrant on obviously they don't know about it, they're not represented by counsel. But you go to Schiff's kangaroo court, whether it's that closed door deposition or that open hearing, the President of the United States doesn't have his counsel there. And really what we're talking about for future presidents and for our country and the other priorities that have to get passed, there should be more of a burden, there should be a more sense of responsibility and duty on the part of Democrats to take the position that Republicans had of we want 100% of the story out. Good, bad, and different.
Right.
Not just 3% that could be spun as favor
100%
as
of
possible.
it. Well, Lee, we've been on for about 30 minutes, and I don't want to cut this short because this is one of the most important things that we've dealt with in our short tenure in Congress. I've been here a little over 9 years, and you've been here about, what, 5 years?
Yeah, finishing up year 5.
Yeah. So we've got great members of the Republican Party in our conference that are part of the committees of jurisdiction. But this, as I said all along, this has been a verdict looking for a crime. And since they've already got their verdict, they're going to push through articles of impeachment. They're going to have a vote, and this will go over to the Senate, and hopefully it'll be over with. The facts speak for themselves, as Lee pointed out, and I believe the president will be exonerated at the end of the day with all this. Lee, anything else you want to add?
I appreciate the invitation. It's great to be in your office. Thank you to all of your constituents for tuning in. They're lucky. We have other colleagues who put it as they're not 435 Jeff Duncans here. The spectrum gets you to people who are pushing stuff like Green New Deal and Medicare for all and these other priorities, racing as far left as possible, now trying to impeach the president and some of the anti-Semitism that we're trying to deal with, especially at the beginning of the year. There's just been a lot of challenges that we face from these other members, and I appreciate you sending Jeff Duncan here to serve as our colleague, because we need balance, and we're seeing, especially with that gavel in Nancy Pelosi's hand, we need more balance than what we have right now.
Well, I appreciate the folks from New York's 1st District sending Lee Zeldin here. We need more Lee Zeldins. Like I said, we've got a rock star team on the Republican side. You didn't see a lot of that because it was in the chamber of secrets, so to speak, of Adam Schiff's down in the basement. But they are doing the heavy lifting in defense of the president in this, in defense of democracy, and ultimately following the charge that we're all given, that's protect the Constitution of the United States of America. And Lee Zeldin's one of the good ones. So the folks in New York, keep sending him back. Keep praying for America, keep praying for our president, praying for members of Congress that we will be able to do the right thing, and we can get beyond this and we can focus on doing your business. And let me end with just saying, I hope everyone out there that witnesses and watches this has a very, very Merry Christmas, and